1, 2, 3. Welcome back to the Combo Catch, everybody. Can everybody hear me? Great. I am Pasta Jardula. Welcome today to the Power Panel. We got something special for you today, ladies and gentlemen. I can see that everybody's cleared the airwaves for us. Nobody's on Rockfin right now. Very few people are on YouTube's. you guys have been following the channel for quite some time. We've been doing this for 5 years, and we've had some type of kind of like evolution of sorts. When it comes to me and Fiorella and our politics, we've been coming, and I've been kind of describing myself as a leftist libertarian. Now, I have never been registered with the Libertarian Party. I was never crazy about them. I never voted for them. I sure as hell wasn't going to vote for George Jurgensen. But there's been this new thing happening within the Libertarian Party. They've come under new management, and the Mises Caucus is now on the spot, right? We've had Spike Cohen on the show several times. And this new management seems to be more of an emulation of a Ron Paul type, very anti-interventionist. They have a gentleman by the name of Scott Horton, who I got to meet at Freedom Fest. We got to do an interview with him, interview from Kyle Anzalone from antiwar.com. And being a civil liberties guy and a guy who cares about freedom of speech, freedom of the press, and actually getting a third party in there, I said that we have to look at the Libertarian Party for reals. Not just necessarily what they stand for, but the fact that they have ballot access across the board. Do I sound good to everybody? How am I sounding? Okay. Ballot access across the board in all 50 states. They have a greater ground game. They have more representation than the Green Party out there, who a lot of us anti-imperialist left that we're sometimes called are kind of aligned with. So with that being said, I've been bringing something to the table I call the Great Compromise. If we get our civil liberties intact, we fight back against censorship. If Julian Assange is shined upon freedom of the press and he is set free, if we have an anti-regime change mentality, and if we get some criminal justice reform, which is very forgotten about when it comes to the Libertarian Party, I say we make a compromise. There are areas there that are in question, and we're going to talk about some of those areas today. We're going to do it light unpacking. There's healthcare, right? How are we going to handle healthcare? This kind of thought process. I think the marketing on the Libertarian Party is that let's remove government from the problem. And if we can do so, maybe that might help out. But will the free market work itself out? Also, regulations. Regulations have been called protections by somebody. I am an anti-fracker. I would ban fracking tomorrow. So the free market is not okay with me there as well. So what we're going to do is we're going to bring in some people. I have is sort of a co-host today. Sam Tripoli was supposed to make the show today. He couldn't make it. So unfortunately, he won't be with us today. We do miss him, and we want to send a shout out and some love to Sam Tripoli. But with me today, so we couldn't let Dave be by himself. He'd be the only libertarian on the panel there, and nobody think with him. So we went to the bullpen. We went to the right hand from Liberty Lockdown. Clint Russell is here. How you doing today, Clint?
I'm good, and I'll do a solid job of representing the tinfoil hat crowd. So Sam is still with us. Don't even sweat it.
Gotcha. So I'm going to bring in my other two guests, and we'll get started because there's been a lot of floating out there. You know what I'm saying? We're not making any insinuations today about who's going to be on any ticket whatsoever. We're just going to talk ideology. But these guys' names have been coming up quite a bit, and I'm going to bring in them 1 and 2. We have Dave Smith, excuse me, and Jimmy Dore.
What's up, guys?
How's it going? Good to see you all.
Well, thank you guys so much for coming on. This is amazing, really, to tell you the truth. I'm so psyched to get a chance to do this. I'm going to let Clint explain right off the bat, since he says that me and him are going to kind of go off to the side and let you two gentlemen get into it. But Clint, I brought you here for one particular reason. You've been big in the freedom movement right now. We were at Freedom Fest together. That was normally kind of like a patriot conservative kind of thing, but it seemed like the libertarians had taken over. We were in the back where we had all our booths. I called it Libertarian Row. And there was this sort of buzz, this kind of coming out party. Scott Horton got to talk on a lot of panels. I went and almost got thrown out of a panel that some ex-libertarians were on, Martha Bueno, and I was kind of challenging her left and right. I got thrown out of that, but it was a great event for the libertarians. So why don't you explain, because they've been talking about this new management in town for the Libertarians. So why don't you explain what the Libertarian Party has captured and what it's all about?
Yeah, I mean, it's pretty straightforward. It's the Ron Paul Revolution 2.0. It's all of the children of the Ron Paul movement of the 2000s and early teens, or excuse me, like 2000 up to 2012. And then there was basically a takeover within the Libertarian Party that kind of got us off track, at least from many of our vantage points. And thanks to Dave and Michael Heiss and a handful of others, it seems as if the what we would classify as the true libertarians are back in charge. But to your point, Freedom Fest consisted of Maj Touré, Spike Cohen, myself, Olivia Rondeau. The list goes on and on. Dave was going to be there. He had a family emergency that kept him from going. But I mean, it's incredible the representation we have at not libertarian events, but just like the liberty-minded, freedom-oriented events. It demonstrates that like we really are kind of the pulse of the new iteration of the Ron Paul revolution.
That's awesome. And I think we'll get more into that as the show goes along. So let's get there. We'll try to understand some ideologies. And Dave, I'm going to let you open up eventually so if you can piggyback on the Mises caucus and all that and what's going on and all the excitement that's surrounding. But I wanted to talk to you both really first right off the bat about this Jon Stewart thing, because comedians have a different place in the political world. No offense to you, David, and to Jimmy as well, is that I heard about your political shows first and your ideologies first before I ever heard one bit of comedy that came out of your guys' mouth. And I think that speaks volumes. It's not that your comedy isn't great enough, but the fact is that you guys are being looked upon in this kind of political light. And what you're saying is really taking hold. Jon Stewart, another one of those comedians right now, right? Back in the days, kind of morphed into this whole political thing. He just got caught giving a Nazi a medal at Disneyland. So it was kind of crazy. But I just wanted to know what your thoughts, and Dave, I'll let you go first, is how do you see yourself right now? Because I bet if you went and looked in the mirror 10 years ago, you would never believe you are where you are today. Go right ahead and piggyback on that, please.
Sure. Yeah. No, I kind of agree with that. I'm all the time kind of blown away, like, oh wow, this is really where everything ended up going. This is pretty weird. Me and Jimmy, when we were on, I can't remember if it was his show or when we were on my show, but we both talked for like 10 minutes together about how crazy it is that we're just a couple of like idiot comedians and we're better than everybody in the corporate press, like all of them. And it's a very weird thing. It's kind of surreal. But I do think that, like, people knowing us from our podcast more than our stand-up, I think that's kind of always how it's been. Like, more people knew, comics from their TV shows than knew them from their stand-up. Always, it's just now this is the new form of that. More people know Rogan from his podcast than know him from, his stand-up. And so that's true for a lot of different comics. But there's like there's an interesting dynamic in America today where it's not just that things are falling apart or that there's like out of control corruption, which both of those are true, but that's been true for a long time. But there's an incredible erosion in the impressiveness level of the elites. Like, no matter how, like I absolutely despise Bill Buckley. I think he's like one of the great villains of the 20th century. But like, he was impressive. If you listen to him speak, he was like an intelligent person. If you listen to like, that was like what was pop, media in, just a few decades ago, would be like Bill Buckley grilling Noam Chomsky for an hour. I'm sorry, but like Joy Reid and Sean Hannity are not quite on that level. I'm not even saying like morally worse. I'm just saying like in terms of how impressive of a person they are. And so it's a much easier environment where, just regular guys like us can break this whole thing down in a way that none of these guys can do. It's just, it almost seems to me like this is, it's some type of like idiocracy future where you're just like, no, I'm just a regular dude, but I seem like a genius compared to all these clowns. So I don't know. I guess that's what I say. But I would also just close by saying I agree with both of your guys' summary of what the Mises Caucus is and what has happened in the Libertarian Party. It's all of us, all the people who are like running it. We were all the Ron Paul kids in 2008 and 2012, and that's like now we've kind of come of age and decided to take the Libertarian Party away from kind of like the moderate kind of sellout types and make it more about hardcore anti-war, anti-Federal Reserve, stuff like that.
The Green Party was up for grabs. It has the infrastructure there. These parties have been out there for a while, but nobody's taken it, and it's kind of falling at the wayside. Jimmy, Dave did talk about the fact is that a lot of people get more popular when it comes to their podcasts, and I can't disagree with that. But don't you feel the stakes have risen because people are walking around with a Dore 2024 pin on? Dave's name's been mentioned. What are your thoughts? Don't you agree that the stakes though have risen when people are looking to comedians to say, hey man, help us out over here. We need some real news and real opinions about what's going on, and not this mainstream news propaganda.
No, you're muted, Jimmy.
I unmuted. Okay. First of all, I think it was very insulting for you to say that people didn't know me from my stand-up comedy. And I mean, I had an award-winning 2008 Comedy Central special. So I think everyone's known me since then. I don't know why no one knows me because of my stand-up. Maybe it's not that good. Maybe my stand-up.
Well, the younger generation, it's 2022. I knew you from your stand-up because I looked at you as like a Bob Dore figure, a Bob Hope figure going to speak to the troops. But the younger generation, they know you from a lot from the Jimmy Dore policy stand. So I'm not trying to, sorry.
Yeah, I'm just teasing. Of course.
All right. I thought you were serious there for a second.
No, of course not. No, no. It wasn't until YouTube. I mean, it wasn't until when I started my own YouTube show on a daily basis in 2015 that I caught on and I started selling tickets. I had, 3 specials. The one in 2008 was chosen Best of the Year by iTunes. Nobody still heard of it, and it didn't move tickets. And it wasn't until I got on YouTube and I started doing my own show on a daily basis. I just did it because I knew that this could work. I saw people with less talent doing very well on YouTube, and I saw how much how many numbers they were getting, and I was like, well, I know I'm better than that guy, and so that's why I got into it. And immediately it took off, and thank God for YouTube. Thank God that we got rid of the censors or the gatekeepers for show business. Right now, if you got an idea and you're compelling and entertaining, you can go do your own show. You don't have to wait around for somebody to give you the nod of approval in Montreal or Aspen or Hollywood, and you can just go do it and you can show that they're wrong. And that's what I did. And so we just went and did it. I mean, I had a radio show. Up until last year, I had a radio show on the Pacifica Network that started in 2009, and it was originated here in Los Angeles at KPFK. And it went all the way across the country, and still that didn't do anything. That didn't move the needle. It didn't help me as far as, people hear my message. And it wasn't until YouTube. And that's the love-hate relationship I have with YouTube. YouTube is this unbelievably corrosive corporate structure that serves the military-industrial complex. And yet we have to use their platform in order to get our anti-war message out, which is kind of ironic. And then of course it leads to people. I'm also on Rockfin. I'm also on Rumble. And then people try to say, "Oh, you're right wing because you're going on that Peter Thiel Rumble," as if Google is working with the socialists or something. It's just unbelievable. So I think it's weird that it's come down to comedians. Joe Rogan was the only one pushing back against the COVID narrative that had a large platform. Of course, we did it at my show. People called us anti-vax, even though I'm double vax. I've got every vax that they ever tell you to get. I got it because I have a critique of the establishment narrative on COVID. They just immediately call you anti-vax. They call me white supremacist. They call me fascist. So these words are starting, and I've been called anti-black recently. You know why they called me anti-black? Because they've overused racist and white supremacist so much, they had to come up with a new term that isn't burned out. And so that's that. So comedians are used to sticking their chins out. And this is why I think it's come down to people like Russell Brand, Dave, me, Joe Rogan. I think it's why we're the voices in the culture right now, pushing back against the establishment, because people in news business, they're go-alongs to get along. They're careerists. They want to advance their journalism career inside the structure of the corporate monopolies, duopolies. And we don't do that, right? Comedians, we're used to sticking our... In fact, the reason why I like being a comedian is because I could get on stage and say things to people that they don't want to fucking hear, and I could make them laugh at it involuntarily. That's what gets me off as a comedian. And that's what journalists, if they do that, they get shown the door. So that's why journalism sucks so bad, because they all come from Ivy League schools now, and they all go into journalism wanting to be famous, like Brian Williams. They don't... If you want to be a journalist, you have to not want to have a lot of friends. And that's what comedians are used to doing, right? We're used to pissing people off with our opinion. And people who go into journalism are there to go along and get along. And now all they're doing is telling us to hate our neighbor. And I'm trying to get rid of that message that I'm not going to blame my neighbor for the COVID lockdowns, for a controlled demolition they did on our economy, which enriched a handful of billionaires who invented the idea of lockdowns and made everybody else poorer. And they want you to blame your neighbor, and they want and be mad at him and think he's evil for not taking a vaccine that didn't work the way they said it did.
I said the hospital beds, Jimmy. We got to worry about the hospital beds.
Right.
Dave, I'm going to let you follow up on that really quick, just if you want to get anything out to get a last word as far as that, what Jimmy was just kind of pointing on, as far as like, you know, these stakes being raised, and now you and Rogan and all these guys, now you guys are the voice out there. So let me let you finish up with that real quick.
Yeah, I really like the way Jimmy said that. That really hit home with me, because it's true. Like as a comedian, like my absolute favorite thing to do in stand up is to go into an area that risks me getting booed off stage, but get the crowd laughing at it. That's like the highest level of what you can do at stand up, is get them laughing almost at the thing they didn't want to laugh at. And then they have to, you pull at them enough that they got to go, damn, that's hilarious. All right. Like that's kind of the highest level. And so when I'm talking about politics and stuff, I'm always kind of just inherently looking for what's the thing that no one else is saying that is the correct thing, or what's the thing that's the most important, you know, like truth that no one else is talking about. And so I just always instinctually kind of run to that. That's just kind of, that's been my thinking through all of this stuff. And I think it's true that overall there was a revolution in communication in this country that almost went like officially documented. And what's bizarre about the corporate press is they want to continue on as if this revolution didn't happen. You know, like it's like they want to continue on. Like we've had the Industrial Revolution, and they want to almost just continue to say, well, no, you have to build these things with your hands. And they're like, we got factories now, man. Like no one's doing it this way anymore. And so in terms of like the tech censorship stuff and all of that starting to the rise of the censorship regime, I hope what people are starting to realize, particularly, there's examples like with Alex Berenson. I don't know if you guys saw that he actually put out evidence that, the Biden administration was grilling Twitter about why this guy hasn't been kicked off yet. So, okay, you could technically say that he didn't put out evidence that they told him to kick him off, but they were at least, with a wink and a nod going, why isn't this guy off? But I thought one of the really interesting moments, again, and this is what Joe Rogan got out of his guest, I haven't seen anything this interesting revealed in the corporate press in the last 5 years, was Joe Rogan asked Zuckerberg about why the Hunter Biden story was suppressed. And his answer right away was the first thing he said. Well, the FBI. Mm-hmm. The FBI came and told us that there was going to be this thing. There was going to be this Russian dump. And then when the Hunter Biden thing came out, well, the FBI and the CIA and Joe Biden and everyone said this was the Russian dump. So we turned it down. And it's like, it's right there in front of you that, and this is where like a lot of libertarians, the kind of like the type that we took the party over from, they'd be like, hey, they're a private company, they can do what they want to do. And then very bizarrely, these like kind of like neoliberal and some leftists will go, hey, they're a private company, they can do what they want to do, which is very weird to hear that from them. But none of that's right. None of that's right. It's not a private company doing what it wants to do. These are giant private companies who are being pretty overtly threatened by the government to, you better make sure that you do this. And I would just say that all of the reason why, like pre-2016, we didn't see all this censorship on YouTube and Twitter and Facebook and all of these places, because they're not incentivized to do that. They're not incentivized. If they have someone who has, like hundreds of thousands of followers or millions of followers, they're not incentivized to kick them off their platform. They want those people on their platform. That's how they make money. So this is a clear example of basically what the problem with everything is in this country, is this partnership between giant businesses, big business and big government working together to kind of control or screw over regular people. And that's like the through line that runs through every major problem we have in this country.
and it's the definition of fascism. I believe you said it on MSNBC. I think it was the first time I saw you. I was like, Dave watches the Convo Couch, because I would always say, no, the definition of fascism is the merger between corporations and state, especially when it's big tech. And that means all our amendments are supposed to be protected. And Jimmy, you have dirtbag leftists up there while we were mentioning that, and we was talking about fascism. Let's not forget about the red-brown alliance that you've been accused of. I was in that article with you there as well, and that's the next thing: the communist and the fascist working together. Clint, let's get you going real quick, because I want you to explain this love affair that a lot of anti-imperialist left are now having with the new Mises Caucus leader, the next coming of when it comes to foreign policy, Scott Horton out there. Can you give a little example of what the Mises Caucus is all about when it comes to foreign policy that might align with some of the anti-imperialist left like ourselves?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, Caitlin Johnstone is one of my favorite writers, and I think she's a self-described communist, but she is one of the few people that seems to be as passionately anti-interventionist as, Scott Horton, Dave, myself, the entire Mises Caucus are as well. So if you're someone on the left that is truly anti-war, yes, we'll have our differences of opinion when it comes to economic models beyond that, but when it comes to being passionately anti-war, look no further. I mean, the Mises Caucus is where it's at. The Libertarian Party, which is now basically the Mises Caucus, is where it's at. And as you said, we actually have, 50 states where you can vote for us. So it's going to be very interesting to see if the guy who's up there, propagating a potential, he's funding a proxy war with a nuclear power over in Ukraine versus Russia, and is simultaneously espousing deep concerns about this fascist takeover that's happening amongst the right wing in this country, while simultaneously the CDC is dictating what needs to be banned, as well as the FBI is dictating that as well. I think that it's going to be a real truth-telling moment, if people are actually able to see through the transparent bullshit when the fascist in chief is telling everybody else to worry about fascism. I just don't know what's going on.
Yeah, could I just jump in on that?
Absolutely, please do.
So I mean, the way I look at it is like this, right? It's like I say, like a leftist at their best, right, is standing up for the powerless against the powerful when the powerless are being screwed over. Like that to me is like a leftist at its best, is that's when they're doing that. And a libertarian is always opposing the government. And so if you just look at through both of that lens, well, if you're talking about the powerful and the powerless, what's the worst example of them being screwed over? It's war. I mean, it's like this. And if you're a libertarian opposing the government, what's the absolute worst government program that there is? Well, of course it's war. What is war other that war is by its very nature innocent people being slaughtered. There's no such thing as a war where that's not happening. It's not ever a situation where you're taking out some bad guys or two groups of bad guys are fighting. You're talking about women and children being murdered in mass numbers. And so for both groups, that has to be, like, by their very nature, that has to be the number one priority. I mean, you look at what's going on in over the last 20 years in all these wars that America has been fighting. And I mean, what's currently going on in Yemen right now is a goddamn moral outrage. It's like just the worst thing in the world that you could imagine. It's babies like vomiting to death because they have these, illnesses that are cured with Gatorade, and there's a blockade and they can't get it in, or maybe that situation is getting a little bit better at the moment. But it's so, of course, that's like, so I think a lot of the reason why a lot of us types in the Mises Caucus at the Libertarian Party are drawn to so many of the principled anti-war leftists, and the same reason why they're kind of drawn to our message is because, hey man, if nothing else, if you come together and you're like, hey, well, we both oppose this genocide, that's a pretty good place to start. It's like if you were living during slavery and you were an abolitionist and someone else was an abolitionist, you kind of right away are like, hey, we're on the same team here. We want to end slavery. And I don't think you'd stop and go, yeah, but we have differences on tax policy. So let's you're over there and I'm over here. It's like, no, if we're both against the genocide, then that's a pretty, why is that? To me, that's a much more important paradigm than like left-right is like pro-genocide, anti-genocide. Like who's on the anti-genocide team? Okay, those are my people, you know? And then, you know, of course, all that other stuff Clint said is absolutely right. The idea that Joe Biden is running around fighting the fascists, or the idea that, you know, any good left-winger or any good right-winger for that matter who goes off of the, you know, kind of the plantation a little bit is deemed a fascist. It's like, look, man, in America today, just objectively, the fascist is the center. The fascist is the range of Joe Biden to Liz Cheney. That's the fascists in America. Not to say there aren't any fascists outside of that range, but the ones who are actually in power and actually are imposing fascist policies are all those people. They're the Democrats and the Republicans.
Okay, really quickly, before we hand it over to Jimmy, I want to know your opinion on this, Dave. I spoke to Scott Horton at Freedom Fest. Scott Horton said that Putin shouldn't have invaded. And I said, wait a second, I'm a pretty pacifist type of guy. I'm an anti-imperialist left. I feel on his border, he tried to negotiate for many years. This was the only choice he had left at this point. In fact, a lot of his citizens were really pissed off that he was letting a lot of these Eastern Ukrainians who are ethnic Russians getting bombed in the Donbass. If you were in charge, how would you approach the whole Russia-Putin invasion or military action? Do you think he was justified?
No, I don't think he was justified. I mean, look, he was certainly provoked by decades of U.S. NATO foreign policy, and that's from encroaching NATO all the way up to Russia's borders. In hindsight, probably the most reckless foreign policy decision that the United States and NATO has made over the last 20 years. Yeah, having a coup in Ukraine in 2014 and installing a hostile government there was a pretty big provocation. Donald Trump, you know, famously, as you know, I mentioned this in my debate with Styx the other day, but everyone knows about the Ukraine Gate thing because the story was, well, he got impeached and for holding up the weapons deal. But the little footnote at the bottom there is that then he caved and gave them all of the weapons that even Obama wouldn't give him, because Obama at least had the common sense to go, you know, this could really provoke Russia. I got away with my coup. Maybe I'll stop short of sending all these weapons in. Trump went a step further and sent all the weapons in. So there's no question that Putin was provoked. But no, I mean, for the same reason I just said, no, he's not justified in launching this war. Look, tens of thousands of innocent people have died in Ukraine, and it's horrible. He could have just seized Donbass. You know, he didn't need to go any further into Russia. So he has no excuse either. I mean, like, he's an evil leader of a government also. It's just that we're living under our government who does nothing but propagandize us every day about what an evil, you know, war criminal he is, while our war criminals have body counts that stack up 1,000 times higher than his. So, you know, but to the nuance of the question there, no, he's not justified. He's not justified in killing innocent people. Nobody's justified in killing innocent people.
Oh, okay. I disagree there. I once again, I don't want to justify anything, but a puppet government on your border, that we can get into that a little bit later. But I want to get Jimmy's opinion upon this. Jimmy, was Putin justified in going in, and how would you approach that situation?
I mean, I'm against war, so I would say no. So that's my answer. But again, there are mitigating circumstances. This isn't the United States going into Iraq to steal their oil. This isn't the United States going into Libya to steal their oil and stop a United States of Africa. This isn't the United States going into Syria to steal their oil. This isn't the United States going into Somalia to steal their oil. This isn't the United States going into Ethiopia. So what this is, what people don't realize, we're the world's terrorists, not Putin. People don't know why. Should Putin have invaded Ukraine? No. Is there a reason why? Was this predicted? Is it rational for him to do that? All those things, the answer to all those things are yes. Yes, it was rational for him to do this, and he was provoked, and we exactly wanted Putin to do this. The United States was the one who pressed the button to make Putin do this. And how did they do that? Well, for 20 fucking years, they've been telling us to stop expanding NATO, and we won't stop expanding NATO. And if you don't think NATO and whoever controls Joe Biden wanted Russia to invade Ukraine and wanted this crisis to happen, then you don't know anything about politics or geopolitical machinations of the military-industrial complex, because that's exactly what this was. So what happened was there was a coup in Ukraine that the United States helped instigate with the help of who? Nazis in Ukraine. That's who we helped overthrow the government with, Nazis. Why? Because the Ukraine government was going to be cozy with Russia instead of being cozy with the European Economic Alliance, which is what. So this is, again, all about economics and natural resources. And so we forced their hand. And so there's a difference between what we did in Iraq and what Putin did in Ukraine. Our hand was not forced in Iraq or Libya or any of those places. We forced Putin's hand in Ukraine, and now we're paying the price. It's amazing to me how the Europeans and the Americans will just let their elites, who are captured by the military-industrial complex, do sanctions on Russia that doesn't hurt Russia, but hurts Europe and hurts the United States. And they don't. And this is the kind of stuff that we were told we were supposed to be worried Trump was going to do. Trump is a madman and a crazy, and he's going to have his finger on the nuclear button. And what is Joe Biden doing? Joe Biden is clinically demented and it's clear for everybody to see, transparently demented. And he is saber rattling and trying to start a war with 2 nuclear powers. This is what I was told Trump was going to do, and that's why we were supposed to be afraid of him. Trump was a madman who was going to start wars with everybody, and it was going to hurt our country. That's exactly what Joe Biden's administration has done, along with NATO. And I don't know what they're going to get out of it. I keep asking everybody, what are they getting out of this? Except trying to ensure the liquefied natural gas market for American companies in Europe. I don't understand what else they're getting out of this, but they're hurting our own people, and we're pushing China and Russia together, which people like Henry Kissinger have been warning about for 20 years. And again, this isn't me. This is the smartest people who know the most about foreign policy have been warning against this. People like Meacham, people like Chomsky, people like Henry Kissinger. And when people from every part of the political spectrum agree on an idea like this, then you know that it's probably true. And so Chomsky is saying the same thing Henry Kissinger's been saying, and now we're saying it. You know who's not saying it? The people, Anderson Cooper, the people, Rachel Maddow. They're all telling you that the good guys are Ukraine. Ukraine are the biggest, most corrupt fucking Nazis in the world. And we're supposed that. Why do you think Hunter Biden had a no-show job at $80,000 a month on their energy board? Because they're the most corrupt country in the fucking world. That's why. And we're propping that up, and nobody can tell me why. They say, oh, it's because we're fighting Putin. We're not fighting Putin. Putin is not half the imperialist that Joe Biden is. Joe Biden dropped more bombs than George W. Bush. Joe Biden and Barack Obama was not a departure from George Bush. They were a continuation. They took us from 2 wars to 7. They made sure the bankers got their bonuses while Barack Obama and Joe Biden kicked 5.1 million people out of their houses at the behest of Wall Street and gave them their houses and made them richer. And then they built those cages that Trump put those Hispanic kids in. By the way, there's more Hispanics in cages today than when Donald Trump was president. And the reason, and so it brings us back to, why does the establishment actually hate Donald Trump and MAGA? Is it because he governed in such a radical way that was the departure from the establishment? Not at all. Donald Trump was like any other president. His biggest accomplishment wasn't bringing us jobs, wasn't ending the wars, wasn't giving us health care, wasn't giving us that. His biggest accomplishment was a tax cut for millionaires and billionaires, just like everybody. So why do they hate him? Because just as I predicted in 2016 when Donald Trump was running for president, that if he became president, the silver lining would be people would now become aware of all the horrible stuff our government has been doing in a bipartisan fashion for the last 40 fucking years. And that is exactly what happened. People were aware that Donald Trump was banning Muslim immigrants at the airport. And you know why he had to ban Muslim immigrants at the airport, refugees? Because Barack Obama spent 8 years bombing the shit out of him. And the establishment doesn't want you to put those two pieces together. Oh, Donald Trump is putting Hispanics in cages. Do you know that Donald Trump deported half as many Hispanics as Barack Obama and Joe Biden did in their first term? So why? Because when Donald Trump was doing it, everybody became aware that Donald Trump and the government was doing it. And local municipalities stopped working with the feds to deport Hispanics. politics because people became aware of it. That's exactly what's happened, right? So Donald Trump is a bad face for the empire and imperialism. And they won't, he wants credit for the vaccines. The establishment won't give Donald Trump credit for it. Why? Because he's a bad salesman. More people will buy the vaccine if you have demented Joe sell it than if you have Donald Trump sell it. Why? I don't know. Maybe it's because the Democratic Party discredited Donald Trump for the first year when he was trying to get the vaccine to people, and they said they weren't going to take the vaccine if it came from Donald Trump. As soon as Donald Trump lost the election, you weren't allowed to say any of that or you would get kicked off Twitter.
Yeah. Let's stick on this Trump thing for a second too, as well, Jimmy and Dave and Clint, for a second, because nobody on this panel over here supported Donald Trump or voted for Donald Trump. However, we'll be listed as Trump sympathizers no matter what. That's the thing. When it comes to media, we're on those lists because we just like to, push back against the establishment. Therefore, if you push back any dissenting voice, you're going to be a sympathizer of Donald Trump. I don't have TDS. I don't think a lot of people do on this panel. However, guys, the Libertarian Party, people like yourself, Dave, people like Justin Amash, you guys have been known to be like anti-Trump, don't like Trump at all. I mean, your debate this past weekend was with Sticks about Donald Trump. How can the Libertarian Party reach out to those voters if they have such a disdain for Donald Trump himself?
Well, I mean, it's true that both me and Justin Amash were critics of Donald Trump, but for very different reasons. So, it's also true that like me and Rachel Maddow are critics of Donald Trump, but again, for very different reasons. So I, to me, I go, look, Donald Trump presided over the genocide in Yemen for every single day of his presidency. He gave the Saudis that $100 billion weapons package and bragged about it. He bombed Syria because he got rolled by his own deep state and tricked into believing those bullshit gas attacks. He murdered the top Iranian military official for absolutely no reason, for being in bed with the Shiite militias in Iraq, who we gave the country to in George W. Bush's war there, when we sided with them before we sided against them and then sided with them again. So I just think, like, to me, it's like, yeah, Donald Trump should be charged for war crimes, just like all these other presidents, and he could share a cell with Dick Cheney and George W. Bush and Barack Obama, and I'd be just fine with that. So I am a critic of Donald Trump, but the point, I think, like, to piggyback kind of off what Jimmy was saying, it's like, there's a lot of people on the left who hated Donald Trump because they'd say like he was racist or something like that, like his rhetoric on about Mexicans or something like that. This guy's a racist and we don't like him. And then they'd be like, well, the CIA doesn't like him, and so I guess they're all on the same side. But it's like you could take a second and realize that, like, the CIA doesn't like him for the reasons you don't. The CIA doesn't care about Donald Trump being racist. The CIA will, incinerate brown children in a third world country and lose no sleep over it. They're not concerned with racism, and they're also, to Jimmy's point, they're not concerned with really the way he was governing. He also, in the same sense that Obama was a continuation of the Bush policies, in many of the most important ways, Donald Trump was still a continuation of those policies. But what Donald Trump really did that made him unacceptable to the establishment was that he ran on, energizing tens of millions of people to hate the corporate press and the ruling establishment. And that he was smart enough, because the only thing Donald Trump's really great at is being a self-promoter. He was smart enough to realize that that was the way to win. That was the way to rally people around him. But that's very dangerous if you're in the establishment, that's like very dangerous. What do you mean you're telling everybody they hate the Bushes and the Clintons and CNN, and they're out at these and they're really angry, and like, I would argue rightfully so. So my thing is that I try, and I do talk to a lot of these people. I mean, a huge portion of my podcast audience are people who are of that ilk. And the message basically is that, look, you just tell them the truth. It's like, you guys are absolutely right to hate Hillary Clinton and the Bushes, and you're absolutely right to hate CNN, and you're absolutely right that there should have been a giant repudiation of all of them. But the idea that Donald Trump was like this America First president just isn't true. I don't hate him for being an America First isolationist. I hate him because he wasn't that. And that was what he was called upon to do. And so you kind of, like with all of these things, when you talk to people, a lot of times when you're talking about regular Americans, they're they're correct in at least like their grievance. You know, like they're on to something and what they're upset about. Like the truth is that Donald Trump got elected because we suffered through the worst financial crisis in modern American history in 2008 after nothing but disastrous wars and the disaster of the Bush-Cheney administration. And Obama's solution to that was to come in and say, okay, well, we'll have interest rates at 0% and record high government spending for the next few years. And then we'll make it look like on paper, oh, look, there's this recovery. But the recovery didn't benefit the Rust Belt. The recovery didn't benefit Americans, the working class in America. Who got rich under Barack Obama? Well, it was all the weapons companies, the think tanks around Washington, D.C. It was all the speculators in Wall Street. Of course, this is directly related to the high government spending and the low interest rates. And then Donald Trump came out and said, screw all these guys. I'm going to bring your jobs back. And I'm going to fight for you guys. And everybody rallied around him. So, this is the reason, this is what they were upset about, and this is why they went with him. So I'm sympathetic to a lot of those people. But the problem is that, your enemy was never Mexicans or even the Chinese or even the Chinese government, as awful as they are. Your enemies are the people in Washington, D.C., at the Federal Reserve, at the weapons companies, at the pharmaceutical companies, all the people who are in bed with your government. That's who's really screwing over the American people. That's who locked you in your home. That's who forced you to lose your job. That's who, raped the economy and gave all of the profits to the big banks. It's your own government. And so, my thing is just try to talk to those people. I always try my best to hate the powerful people, but don't hate the regular people. Most regular people are just trying to live their lives. You know what I mean? And they want to support the person who they think has their back. So that'd be my answer.
I think you guys both have the same kind of analogy there, you and Jimmy. Let's not hate our neighbors. Let's hurt people with power. And I think that libertarians recognize that better than most. And I really also want to point out that this bear and this dragon shaking, something that Jimmy pointed out, we are pushing Russia and China very, very close together. And that's something we're going to have to deal with. I don't think there's anything wrong with it to a point, except that it's removing us from the equation. Let's talk healthcare real quick, because I know we have a limited amount of time. I am of the idea that we should be able to take care of the most vulnerable, the most poor, the most in need in this country when it comes to healthcare. Yes, other countries have figured it out, maybe a little bit different. Maybe we don't want to hand over our healthcare system to the government, which I surely don't want to do that as well. But maybe a funding mechanism. Jimmy, I'm going to let you go first on this on healthcare, because this is a strong kind of hard line when it comes to a lot of leftists in America. We want healthcare. Why should we spend our money on wars, on all this other BS, bailing everybody else out, bailing out the rich people? Why can't we have something for the poor? Why can't we have healthcare?
So a lot of people would tell you we do have healthcare for the poor. We have Medicaid. We have Bob. So if you're too poor, and this and that, and then people like Bill Maher tell you, hey, you can go to an emergency room if you need. You know how people go to the emergency room for their diabetes treatments, and so I'm for Medicare for all, because the most popular health insurance program in the country has been my entire life Medicare, and there's no other healthcare program that comes close to it. And the reason why is because you're eliminating a capitalist in between you and your doctor. So right now you have a capitalist who needs to make money off you between you and your doctor. If you remove that person and you put a G-man there, that takes out the profit motive at least, right? And so now I can vote somebody in or vote somebody out to make my healthcare better. I can't do that at Blue Cross, which is what I have. And so I've always had the best health insurance plan I could possibly get, and it doesn't matter when you get sick. I got sick in 2008. I had, gold-plated Blue Cross healthcare, and I went bankrupt. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if you get sick. You're going to incur a hardship in this country, and so the rest of the Western world has figured out this healthcare thing. And they provide healthcare to their workers. The joke I tell in my act is the guy from what's his name, Howard Schultz, the head of Starbucks, said that we can't afford healthcare for everybody in America. And I was like, Howard, why is it every other Western world figured this healthcare shit out decades ago, and they also make better fucking coffee? What is it about countries that give their people healthcare? They don't have to add pumpkin spice to their coffee to make it taste good because it tastes delicious black. I was in Italy and I had a coffee in Italy and I was like, holy shit, what is not in here? And I'll tell you what's not in there. No fucking tears of the uninsured and no Monsanto. And so I understand, especially after COVID, why people would be hesitant to turn their healthcare over to the government. Now, that's not what we're doing. So people have the the bad idea that if we get rid of Blue Cross, that we're somehow going to have a G-man run my hospital or run my doctor's office. What they're going to be doing is writing a check to my doctor, just like Blue Cross writes a check, except now there won't be a profit motive in the government. And then I can have some control over the government. So that's to me, I get why people would be afraid to have the government run their healthcare. The government's not going to run their healthcare. My doctor is still going to be my doctor. Whoever runs my hospital is still going to run my hospital. The government's just going to write the check. So I think when people hear those facts, I think it changes their minds or it softens them up. And if that doesn't soften them up to Medicare for all, just sit around and wait for them to get sick.
We'll let Dave jump in this and give his opinion right now, because this is I think it's a quagmire for, some libertarians to get in there and get these people to come on over on this issue alone. So Dave, why don't you jump in on this, on how you would attend to this healthcare problem? And then Clint, you follow up if he missed anything. Okay.
Sure. Yeah. Look, I mean, this is where me and Jimmy are going to part ways and disagree. And, Jimmy's like a hero to me. I think he's one of the greatest anti-war voices in the world. And I love his show. But I really disagree on the healthcare stuff. And I'll tell you, my libertarian kind of, spidey senses tingle when people talk about how popular Medicare is. And, okay, so if it's so popular, let's make the taxes for Medicare voluntary and find out exactly how popular it is. See how many people want to continue to pay their taxes for Medicare. When something's forced and taken from you and then you say it's popular, it kind of just like, it feels like you're putting a gun to some guy's head and saying, we're going to go see this movie right now. And then you're going, he really wanted to come see this movie. And I just feel like, okay, so let's just put down the gun. And then we could figure out how many people want to pool their money in this type of way. I think that the real question comes, look, the reason why the healthcare system is so broken in America is because it's a completely cartelized system. And there's all types of these like government, it's like everything else. It's like all these private public, collusions that are going on that screw over the American people. And this is why the prices are so incredibly high, which is really what the real problem in healthcare is. It's that, which Jimmy kind of got to. It's that you'll go bankrupt from these prices. It's insane what it costs. You have like, if you go to a hospital, if you get an ambulance ride to a hospital, you're already in the hole, like thousands of dollars. It makes no sense at all. You don't see this in any other type of businesses. And so much of this is because everything is being paid by a third party. There's all types of rules and regulations about how they have to be billed for everything. And it's a business, just like everything else. So what happens when you have a business that's hyper-regulated is that all of the top businessmen rush to take over the regulators and then write into law the regulations that will benefit them the most. If you look at the areas, the very few areas that in healthcare that have been really pretty much left to the market and are not like involved in this, it's very difficult to find any of these insurances that cover LASIK eye surgery. It's very difficult to find any of these surgeries that cover any of these insurances that cover cosmetic plastic surgery, boob jobs, something like that, for example. And look at what's happened with those procedures. They've been drastically reduced in the price. The price has come way down. The quality has gone way up, which is what tends to happen when you have a true laissez-faire free market. Not a government, not something private. I'm not talking about capitalism like J.P. Morgan, getting loans for free from the government and then loaning it out to the American people at interest. I'm talking about honest competition where people have to compete for who can provide a better service at a better price to customers who get to voluntarily choose what they do with their money. If you want better quality care for lower prices, that's the best method. Now, after that, you're always going to need to have some type of safety net for people who fall through the cracks. But I would just argue that we'd be much better off having this done voluntarily. And if you can get up enough people to vote for some politician who will then pass a law to then make sure we take care of these people, well, if the people are good enough to vote for that person, then we've got to make sure the people are good enough to pool the money voluntarily. I would say that otherwise you get caught in this situation where you're going to have the blood-soaked monsters who we're all against in government taking advantage of this. And I would also just add that, you know, even if Medicare was actually popular, and if you made it voluntary, people wanted to continue to pay into it, well, even if they were paying into it exactly the way they are right now, man, are you guys looking at a cliff that you're about to fall off of when all these baby boomers really retire? Tens of trillions of dollars of unfunded liabilities. This whole thing is coming down one way or the other.
Clint, before you make a comment about that, Jimmy, do you want to retort to that right now? Because this is the part I have problems when it comes to the libertarian economic model. The fact that if we have a free market, it will kind of somehow work itself out naturally. I have never seen an example where capitalism, and I understand they're kind of pitching this compassionate capitalism, where capitalism, though, doesn't turn to fascism. At the end of the day, the people with the most capital are going to lobby the government or find a way to lobby the government, and we will have that marriage once again. So go ahead, Jimmy, and give your opinion on this, what Dave just said.
You know, I agree with Dave in spirit. It's just it doesn't play out in reality. Yeah, I remember when I had Ron Paul on my show, who I love. I love Ron Paul in lots of different ways. I disagree with him in lots of different ways too. But I asked him when I had him on my show, can you point to an instance in history when the capitalists took over a culture and they didn't immediately poison the water and fuck over the workers? And he couldn't.
Well, I mean, but the truth is that if you really look at what happens if you look through historical examples, say, I don't even necessarily disagree with you if you say that like the capitalism doesn't just lead to fascism, but what the step in between there is government interventionism. That's usually what the capitalists end up moving toward. And so I think that's what you want to cut it off. I mean, look, like if truthfully, what ends up happening is that those capitalists then go and lobby the government to do their bidding, and they screw over the people in far more profound ways when they have the power of the government behind them. So I don't necessarily disagree with you that this can, you know, lead into that direction, but what is actually the step in between that's causing it? And the step in between is that they're lobbying the government to work on their behalf, not yours. Even in that example that you use with them poisoning the water, I mean, it's like if they're poisoning the water of people, of the drinking water of a town, they're committing a heinous crime against them. Why are they not held account to that? Oh yeah, because they have all the judges in their hip pocket. Oh yeah, because they've bought off all of their congressmen.
And so Dave, so I think that leads to the natural progression would be the next point in this conversation would be that you want to get rid of the corruption in government, that the capitalists can always buy the government, right? And so my solution for that would be public financing of elections. Now, what would your solution be? How do you get money out of government? Because that's the problem. We agree on the problem that there's always a capitalist who's going to corrupt the government for his own purposes, and that fucks over the regular person. My solution would be public financing of elections. What's yours?
My solution is to reduce the power that they have, because power tends to corrupt, and when you reduce the power, there's less power that can be corrupted. The problem with a rule that says, oh, okay, there's no more money in politics or something like that, right, is that these guys will always be one step ahead of whatever your rule is. Look, it's illegal for the Saudi Arabians to give Hillary Clinton money in her campaign for president. That's already illegal. We have that law in the book. But there's nothing that says they can't give the Clinton Foundation $10 million. So they just give the Clinton Foundation $10 million. And then it's like, oh, no, the Saudis aren't, right? Saudis aren't allowed to just like give money into our elections. And then so weird, once she loses, they don't feel like donating money to her foundation anymore. Like they're just not interested in philanthropy the way these genocidal maniacs were before. So my thing is like this. what it all comes down to is how powerful the government is. If you think our government right now spends in the neighborhood of $6 trillion a year, $6 trillion. It's the most powerful entity in the history of humanity. And if you think you're going to have a government that size, that much power, that much concentrated power, but I'll write some rule to say that people won't be able to try to control who wields that power, I don't think there's any rule you can think of. The only answer is to destroy the ring. It's not to like, how do we protect against who can get access to it? It's got to be destroyed. Healthcare, education needs, all these things have to be done by communities who come together, who work together and cooperate and try to take care of people the best they can. But the idea that we're going to have some rule that says, oh, corporations are no longer allowed to exert influence over this $6 trillion government, whether it's on top of the table or underneath the table, whether they find there are other ways to do it, yeah. I think it's impossible.
Are you advocating for anarchism here? Is that what I hear? Because at the end of the day, if we're going to make a rule, I mean, if you don't want to make rules, what rule are we going to have to make? I mean, we're going to have to make a rule to suppress the government's power there, right? I mean, some rule will have to be made. There's going to have to be some form of a government. So, I mean, how do you square that circle?
Well, that's basically what I'm advocating for, is the ideal society, just like Noam Chomsky would say too. Governments are power centers, and they're based on an involuntary relationship that the government is the only area where a service is provided that you have no say in. It's the services, you buy the service or you go to jail. And that, yes, ideally, we would live in a society that was as voluntary as possible, and that even if there's an organization that provides security, as the government pretends to with police, and it's really just like most of the time like an invading military. But whether the service is security or education or healthcare or housing or any of that, yes, ideally, if you want to empower people, they should be able to voluntarily choose whether that provider is doing a good job at providing that service. And government is, by its nature, a monopoly, and it's a monopoly based on violence. So yes, essentially, the ideal society would be a voluntary one.
So you'd be for the public option then, though, right? Because that's kind of like your idea.
Well, the public option in terms of being like what Obama was initially pushing, like basically we tax everybody.
He didn't get it through. He didn't.
No, I know. He ran on it, right, and then backed off.
Yeah, he ran on a public option. So.
Yeah. No, I wouldn't support that. I would support like people voluntarily pooling their money together to cover people's health care. I think that's fine. But no, if you're talking about empowering the IRS, Jimmy, I saw you had such a great tweet the other day, dude, when you said, oh, you really think these tens of thousands of new IRS agents that they're hiring are going to go after the billionaire class? No, they're going to be going after regular people. And it's like, dude, you're so right. And you're so close to just realizing that the last 10,000 were doing that too, man. So
I know, I got it.
Yeah, so if the income tax and the IRS is absolutely, I mean, it's like, my Scott Horton talks about this too, but like if a foreign power invaded and conquered the country and instituted the income tax, it would be so obvious to everyone what this is. This is us living under the oppression of a hostile regime who have decided that it's a crime for you to have a job and that you lose your Fifth Amendment and must incriminate yourself, must report everything to the government so that you can pay your fine for the crime of working, or the punishment is jail. And so if that's what you're funding a public option with, then no, I'd oppose it. But if you want to sell people on how great your public option is, then have at it.
So what can you point to? I mean, I'm not going to pretend you don't make good points. You make good points. But I think my points are stronger, obviously, because I have them. But can you point to, there are a few countries that actually deliver healthcare, but they don't do it 100% through the government. There are some hybrid. I think maybe the Philippines and maybe a country in Europe. I can't remember what, but they don't have, maybe Switzerland or Sweden or somebody. They don't have 100% government provided healthcare. They have kind of this, and it works. But can you point to a country that has a healthcare system you'd like to mimic?
Well, I mean, I think that the again, you have to kind of look at, this is always what people get me, they kind of pin me on this. If I go like, if I say like, well, at this time period, this was doing better than this, they go, so you want healthcare from the 1950s or something like that. And I'm like, well, no, I'm not saying like, the conditions of at that time, but before Medicare and Medicaid and all of this was created, I mean, the American healthcare was the envy of the world. Now that's for that time period. So obviously there's been tremendous like advancements in medical technology, and I want all of the advancements as well. But I don't know that I think that, look, I mean, we've had, if you talk about adding government entitlements, we've had Medicare and Medicaid, and then under Jimmy Dore's favorite president, George W. Bush, he added the Medicare Part D and threw in the prescription drugs. You had Obamacare adding far more government subsidies to this, and yet here we are still talking about this problem. And so, I'm not an expert in every single country's system, but I do know that like a lot of these countries, like say Canada and the UK, it's painted out by Americans like these are these like wonderful systems where there are no problems, and there are lots of problems in those systems. I know specifically, and so it's like, no, look, I mean, I think that what you tend to see when you actually leave things to the free market, and if you look in, say, in real time right now, and technology is healthcare is a technology based field. Like that's really what you're purchasing. Look, cell phones and televisions and all types of technology are really are pretty much the most deregulated things in our society. There's no government programs like involved. There's no like universal television program. There's no television welfare. And yet poor people have big screen TVs in their house in America. And yet they all have cell phones, even though a cell phone was like a luxury item not that long ago. Like in all of our very recent memory, we remember the time when a cell phone was a thing a rich guy had. And so I genuinely believe that if you just left healthcare to the free market in 10 to 15 years, poor people would have better healthcare than rich people have today, just like they have better cell phones than rich people had 10 to 15 years ago. They have better televisions. They have better computers, Now, I do also recognize that there's, particularly in healthcare, there's always going to be a need for communities to take care of those the less fortunate amongst us. But that's always been true. There's always been church hospitals and community hospitals that take people in and don't see them. In fact, the great Ron Paul, who you invoked, worked for a church hospital and made $1 a day, and they never turned anyone away. And that was how it was done. And I think we'd be much better off under that type of system than trying to go through the enormous lobby class and political class to try to find a way to get them to pass some law that's going to, give us peons some more crumbs.
Let's Clint, close the door on this healthcare thing if you have anything else to say on this.
Yeah, well, they covered it pretty thoroughly, but I would say that kind of, the left talks a lot about income inequality in this country and globally, moreover. And I think that there's a real sincere issue with it, primarily because of the way the economy is now structured. And ultimately, I think that what libertarians are best at, besides being anti-war, is ultimately central banking. And I'm curious if Jimmy is at all open to the idea of abolishing, either fiat currency or the central bank. I think that that's a huge kind of a missing the forest for the trees aspect of why everything that the government gets its hands into skyrockets in price. Is that they have the coercive power of price setting, which ultimately creates shortages, which is what Dave was alluding to when it comes to Canada and the UK. Ultimately, we don't have enough doctors to deal with the sick people in this country for a litany of other reasons that we can't possibly touch on in this conversation. But I think that a lot of our problems in this country would be resolved if we could get away from the power of the central banks.
Jimmy, do you want to say anything about that?
Yeah, I wish I was smart enough to talk about the central bank stuff. And I know the libertarians know that shit inside and out. And I don't.
Sorry to put you on the spot, man.
No, but I do. I mean, I can see that the Federal Reserve is not there to serve the country. It's there to serve the oligarchy. It's there to serve the moneyed interests. And, that's why, the stocks keep going. Like the CARES Act, right? So that was the largest upward transfer of wealth in the history of humankind, and they packaged it as a help for employed people. That's how they saw. I had Ro Khanna, the lying bullshitter, come on my show and say that. He said that, we had to get that bill through because of the CARES Act, because of the unemployment benefits, and those people were really hurting in my district. And I said, how happy are you that the only person in media who's going to actually ask you about that and hold your feet to the fire is a pothead comedian? Because I'm the only one who's going to do it. And he knew what I was saying, but he couldn't acknowledge what I was saying, because if he did, he would have to acknowledge that he was bullshitting, which he was. Everybody who voted for the CARES Act is a corrupt piece of shit, and that includes everybody. And Bernie Sanders could have did something. He could have pulled a Rand Paul and put a hold on that bill and made everybody aware of what was happening, and he didn't do it. I don't know how I got started talking on this, but because of the banking thing.
Well, I'll add just real quick that BlackRock, who I think we can all come together in saying is a pretty shitty organization, has $10 trillion under management, and they were the entity that was put in charge of handling most of the COVID relief funds. So you can imagine who got those funds at the end of the day.
I'm afraid that the corruption is so embedded in our government. I think it's over. I think our experiment here in the United States is over. Like George Carlin kind of came to that belief before he died. And I think it's really here now for sure. I think what Joe Biden is doing, trying to get us to hate that the enemy is inside your own country, it's your neighbor, and people are buying into it. That's the thing that's scary. I just got a text. People are trying to pretend that it's bad what's happening to CNN right now. My old roommate, I just got a text from him going, is this real? Is this really happening? And he sent me a video about how the guy who is running CNN now is supposedly a Donald Trump donator. And I'm like, well, the guy who used to run it was a Joe Biden donator. What the fuck? And if you think CNN is ever going to do anything other than manufacture consent for the oligarchy, you're wrong. That's what they've done since they've been invented. That's what they're going to do no matter who owns it or buys it. That they're going to manufacture. So, but people buy into that. Like, oh my God, the MAGA is getting control of our media, and our enemy is our own neighbor. And so that's really working on people. And it's scary to see, because that's all they have left. All they have left is censorship and controlling the narrative, because they've lost. They're never gonna legislate that helps your life. They're never gonna end the wars and invest that money back home. They're never gonna give you health care that doesn't bankrupt you. They're never gonna give you a living wage. And what's gonna keep happening is what's been happening is the rich are gonna keep getting richer, and the poor are gonna keep getting poorer. And there's gonna be no middle class, which there almost is no more in America. 80% of workers live paycheck to paycheck. Half of America can't afford a goddamn $500 emergency, and 50% of all wage earners earn $30,000 or less in the richest country the face of the earth has ever seen. And what I try to tell people is, what do you call a system that takes the richest country the face of the earth has ever seen and turns most of its workers into poor people? You call that a failed system. So we're living in a failed system right now, and people still want to blame their neighbor, and they still think if we just get the right politician in there, it'll change things. What we need is a real revolution in this country, and the revolutionaries are being called white supremacists, and they're being called racists and Nazis, and that's of course being called that by the incrementalists, the people who tell you to keep voting Democrat, the people who tell you to keep voting for Republicans, and that's how we're gonna get out of this. That's how we got into this. And the only way we can get out of this, I think, is with some kind of real in the streets kind of revolution. And if I knew how to lead something like that, I would.
Well, a lot of people are screaming your name now and saying with the guy down below over there. Last quick question, we'll get you guys.
If I went for president, and I would love to run for president just because of what Force the Vote did. Force the Vote revealed all the phonies and fakers inside the Democratic Party and all their enablers in the media. It revealed them. And now everybody who wants to see it can see it if they want to. So if someone with my message ran for president, meaning that the way what I tell people is the thing that scares the establishment the most is the left and the right realizing we have a common enemy, and that's why they keep us divided. So that's why when I interviewed a Boogaloo boy, they made it seem like I was interviewing Hitler instead of another working class person who's been fucking decimated by this economy, who's against the war, against the cops, against Trump, and for gay people. They made it seem like I was talking to a Nazi. So anybody who stands up against the establishment, they're going to call a Nazi and a a white supremacist. Even black people, they're calling white supremacists.
Larry Elder.
The headline in the LA Times, Larry Elder, white supremacist.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
isn't it just like a black guy to be so sneaky? Supremacy behind all his black skin. Well, listen, I've had such a pleasure talking with all of you. I hate to end. I have a show I have to go do right now, so I have to sign off. So thank you for having me. This is great. I would love to do it again.
Take
Great,
it easy,
Dave.
Jimmy.
Appreciate you, man.
Definitely, Jimmy. I know we kept you a little bit longer than I said we would. Dave, let's give you the last word real quick as far as your pitch, as far as should leftists come and consider the Libertarian Party this time out? Is it a real third party? Can it get on the ballot? Can it get 5%? Can it get the public funding? Can it crush the two-party duopoly once and for all this time out?
Yeah, well, I think it can. And I think more importantly than that, we just have no choice but to try, because what else are we going to do? So let's try. Okay. You know, I mean, it's like both like, I think pretty much everyone listening to this show knows that both the Democrats and the Republicans have committed treason against the American people. They've completely sold out the country. And this is like, you know, God damn it, this is still the United States of America. That's just unacceptable. And here you have a political party that really stands for the spirit of the founding documents of this country. Like, no, look, what we can all come together on is that we're a free country. We're not an empire who goes around the world, you know, starting wars for no reason. We don't have like a bailout state that takes your tax money and gives it to billionaires. We don't need to have a militarized police force. We don't need to have nonviolent criminals in jail. We don't need to have, you know, a Federal Reserve printing trillions of dollars out of thin air and handing it to big bankers. If we can come together on these, you know, like very basic, most important principles, then we could save this country, and we could wake up enough people that they actually realize what I think Jimmy was touching on just there. That's the real truth of it. Their biggest fear is like left-wingers and right-wingers realizing we have a lot more in common than we do with the ruling class. And just to add to Jimmy's point, why the hell do you think they love pushing all of these like culture war social issues so much? Why do you think it is that every single day, if you turn on your TV, you're always going to hear about something with, you know, trans children or something with whatever the thing that's going to make the left and the right fight against each other and constantly be fighting over these things that pale in comparison to importance of all the issues I just went over. You know, it's like that's what they want. They want the country to be pitted against each other, and they spend so much time propagandizing the American people that it makes me think it's a worthwhile mission to spend a lot of time countering that propaganda. And that's what we're doing. I'd highly recommend people check us out, lp.org/join.
I was just going to say, are you guys going to be ready right out of the gate as soon as this election is over? In this next one coming up here in November, I think it's got to be outside as soon as we get out of the box, it's got to be, let's go, game time. We're ready to rock and roll. We're signing people up. We're getting people over, and let's have this movement move forward. Clinton, you got anything else to say before we get on out of here, brother?
Yeah, I would just say that, you know, if you're the type of person that watches a show like this, I think you already understand the existential risks that we're facing. As Jimmy even said, I think this is the end of the experiment. I think he's right. I think that we are now basically in triage mode where we get to decide, what do we care about most? Do we care about ending the wars? Do we care about, you know, keeping people alive in this country, not starving them to death, not letting them freeze to death or melt in California since they're now having rolling blackouts? I think that there's certain things that we can come together on that matter more than the things that take us apart. And I think that the people that now, you know, basically run the Libertarian Party are your people. I think that they're the ones that get these issues in a really sincere fashion, and they care deeply, and they're sincere. They're not going to bullshit you and try and, you know, trick you into supporting us. So like, look at what we actually believe in, and think deeply about, you know, our justification for our belief system. It's very rare that anyone can have a in-depth conversation with any libertarian and not come away thinking, okay, this guy is actually really processing this information. I mean, I spend my entire life doing this now, thank God, because of Dave and a bunch of other people that helped me out. I get to really, you know, focus all my energy on this stuff. I think that we have the answers, and I think that if people are willing to work with us, they'll be very happy with what they find. So I hope people will get on board.
Well, I just got a message from Jeffrey P. Hurley. He was watching it. He is your chair of your Clark County Libertarian Party, and I think he's Been getting a great message out there. It's new management. It's a new message. And I wish you gentlemen the best of luck. I think I have a feeling we'll be doing something like this again soon, hopefully. And I'll catch up with you at Skankfest, Dave. Thank you so much for coming on today. And thank you, Clint.
I'll be there too.
well, you know, I live here, baby. So we'll be here, guys. So thank you so much for coming on today. I can't thank you guys enough.
Oh, thank you, brother. Happy to do it. Happy to do it again.
We'll see you again soon. All right, guys, that's it for today. I just want to remind everybody we do have a Give, Send, Go up. We are going to Brazil. The Convo Couch will be in Brazil. We'll be heading our way there soon. We'll get our boots on the ground. What we need you to do, if you got a few extra bucks, and we understand, ladies and gentlemen, this is some tough times right now. A lot of people are out there and suffering. They ain't got a few extra bucks. So we know how much it means. But if you can go to our GiveSendGo.com, this is a really expensive one, ladies and gentlemen. The trips to get to Brazil alone are pricey. And we only got about $200 in the till. But we know if you get out there and you can help us out, you guys will do the best. Help the Convo Couch get to Brazil. We are going to Brazil, Fiorella and I, and we'll be covering this important election between Bolsonaro and Lula. Ladies and gentlemen, that's it for today. I hope you enjoyed that little power panel we got going. We're going to do it again. It's very interesting. An anti-imperialist left like Jimmy, Dave Smith, who a lot of people have been talking about his presence within the Libertarian Party. Clint Russell out there, you know, Liberty Lockdown does a lot of work. Guys, be on the lookout. We'll have something coming up. We'll do that. I engineered the show myself. So for Pasta Jardula and myself on those ones and twos, we love you all there, guys. Combo out. We'll see you soon. Come on back. We'll see you Friday.